Welcome home. At the end of this podcast that you're about to watch, that's the suggestion that our guest, Greg Gorrell, says that you could say to any Vietnam vet that you pass on the street. You can say thank you for your service. You can also say welcome home, because we didn't say that to them then. We should say it now. We're talking about the Vietnam War then and now, and we're talking with Greg Gorrell next on Purpose Under Pressure. Well, the heat is on. Let's get cooking. This is Purpose Under Pressure. It's a podcast about people I like to say just like you and me, maybe today, maybe not so much, but people who are on purpose, people with a why, people who put that why to work and what they do when the pressures rise to knock them down. When I say not so much, I just mean some people have accomplished more and done more and will lead better. Well, you'll meet them in a second. Don't forget to like us, follow us, subscribe, tell a friend. We appreciate it. It's how people find out about this show. It's how people find out about what we're trying to do here. If you like it and other people think that you might know what you're talking about, maybe they give it a chance too. So we do appreciate your support. Purpose Under Pressure is brought to you by Sandler by the Ruby Group, serving sales professionals nationwide from their Akron and Columbus, Ohio locations. They're also in Jacksonville, Florida. They are also in upstate capital region of New York. They are one of the fastest growing and largest sales training organizations that Sandler has. Ruby Group is killing it. They are sales training, their business growth, their revenue development, but more importantly, I think they're helping people do things right on purpose. They wouldn't sponsor this show if they weren't. It's not just sales gimmicks that get things done in the world. Like, do things right, folks. Do things right, sell right, position yourself right, show yourself right, be right. That's what Sandler does, and that's what the Ruby Group is all about. So if that's the way you want your business to perform and your people to represent you, it's worth a call. Check them out online at therubygroup.sandler.com. I'm a little nervous today. My show today, I think, is a very important one because I think we only have so many opportunities to tell the story that we're going to tell, and I don't want to blow it. So if I feel a little nervous, if I seem a little off my game, it's because I think this is a really big deal, and let me tell you why. My guest today is a friend. He's a mentor. He's a role model for just about anybody seeking a life well lived. I've known Greg Gorrell for a long time, and I've known him to be a fine person, but I'm learning more and more and more about him, and I can't wait for you to meet him. And here's why. Greg is an Army infantry combat veteran of the Vietnam War in 1967, saw active duty there running search and destroy missions in the Mekong Delta. He was also a 4.2-inch mortar soldier. He's a lifetime Ashland resident, but like I say, you wouldn't know that he had fought in that war and he had done the things that he had to do in that war to survive. He is now trying to kind of correct that a little bit, and we're going to talk about it. He's the author of a book, Vietnam Survival There and Home. It's a story about life, death, heartache, and faith, forgiveness, hope, and healing. And folks, if you hear that again, you'll understand there's two different lines there. There's positive, there's negative, there's yesterday, and there's today. And that's what this show and that's what this book is all about. We're going to dive deeply into that. I can't wait for you to meet, and I'm proud to introduce you to Greg Gorrell. Greg, welcome to Purpose Under Pressure.
Good morning, Brian. Thanks for the opportunity to share.
I'm really glad that you're here. We don't take enough time. Everybody I know, people you know, we don't take enough time to talk to our, not just even just veterans, senior citizens in general. They have so much to teach and so much to tell and so much that we can learn, and we let those opportunities go by, and I don't want to do that. And so, Greg, thank you for joining our show, and thank you for writing the book and talking about your experience in Vietnam. And I think one of the questions that I want to ask in the book, and I wrote this down, it says a story of one of the living and 58,000 dead. A story of one of the living and 58,000 dead. What does that mean to you? And is that kind of why you wrote this book?
The story of the one of the living, in this case, happens to be me, but over 2.5 million men and women served in Vietnam. And each one of them that are still living, they have a story to tell, but most Vietnam veterans to this day haven't. I wanted to tell my story while I still could. My family wanted to know more about it. My kids wanted to know more about it. And I found by writing the book, other people have learned more about it. But it's not just about those of us that are living. And by the way, Brian, less than 30% of us, of Vietnam veterans that actually served in country, are still living. We're dying at the rate of 400 a day. And this book is also not just for the living, but the 58,000 American soldiers who paid the ultimate price for their families to have some understanding as to what this must have been like for those that they have lost. I will tell you that I've had a number of people who have now read the book, who have sent me notes, letters, and cards and saying they had no idea what the circumstances were like in my part of the Mekong Delta until they read my book.
I believe that, and we had talked a little bit about that. Why do you think that is, Greg? And I know you know. Why don't veterans talk about it more? Why don't we talk to our families about it more if we've experienced those situations? What holds that back? What keeps that story at bay?
I'm very careful in the prologue and in the epilogue of the book that I say this is my story, and I'm not intending to represent anybody else's story except to address your question. I think most Vietnam veterans who actually served there, particularly in challenging situations, they thought when they came back to the United States, if they survived Vietnam, that life was going to be immediately better when they landed on U.S. soil. And for most of us, it was not. When I landed at Travis Air Force Base in Southern California, I thought, I am grateful that I have survived. But they were burning the American flag and the draft card. The mood of the country was ugly, demonstrations all over the country, name calling. And so most of us shut it down because of how we were treated. There's a particular event that happened actually here in Ashland that caused me to even further shut down. And that's where I was asked to come to talk to a group of people in this community about what was really going on in the war in 1967, from my perspective.
They asked you to talk in 1967, or was it later on?
It was later on.
Okay.
To talk about, the events in the war. This was actually in 1967. I'd been home 2 or 3 months.
Okay.
And a man who had written me to support me from a local organization invited me to come to speak to his group. I didn't want to do it, Brian, because of the mood of the country and some of the things I experienced in Vietnam. But out of respect for him, I did come and speak to the group. And one of the men in the group raised his hand and said, basically, why aren't you guys winning this thing? And I took that to mean that he was a World War II veteran. It was a different war, Brian. We did not understand the nature of the Vietnam War when we got into Vietnam. We were trained in World War II tactics, but this was hit and run, booby trap, sabotage warfare. Even our leaders, I don't think, fully understood what they were putting us as young soldiers, 18, 19, 21-year-olds there. So the question was an innocent question. Why aren't you guys winning this thing? Well, we weren't winning this thing because the strategy was not consistent with what we were faced with in Vietnam. We did not understand the culture of the country or the people. And so when he said that, I shut down. I froze. I thanked the man who'd asked me, had supported me. And I left that meeting and I came home and I threw away, with the exception of a few items, all of my Vietnam items, thinking if I throw these things away, I'll put the war behind me. Well, of course, that wasn't the case.
No. And how were you able then to go about? I'm interested in how you were able to assimilate. I want to get back to what it was like there, but I'm also extremely concerned about what it must have been like at home for you and for the other veterans, because I think that's shaped our country. We've lost a lot of history, and we missed an opportunity to. The best of us didn't show. The people here, you know what I'm saying? We didn't do what we should have done as a country, and we let you guys down. And I'm wondering how you were able to kind of come back from that.
Well, I was raised by two parents that taught great principles. Two of those principles was you serve your country and you serve your God and you work hard to take care of your family. So I latched onto those principles, went to work. By the way, I was a young married when I was drafted.
And I had married when you were drafted.
I was married and I had no siblings. And the notion was back in those days, if you were young married and you had no siblings, you wouldn't be drafted. Well, of course, that wasn't true. So I lost my draft deferment at Ashland College. I'm a young married for less than a year. And I'm trained to go to war at sea for 21 days in the Pacific. And we land in Vung Tau, January 1st, 1967. And sent into the Mekong Delta on search and destroy missions to try to take back the Mekong Delta, which had been pretty much overtaken by the Viet Cong. And so I was young married when I came home. So I had a wife to support, and I'd been taught there is no free lunch. And so I went to work. I went back to college. I had a man that was very gracious and let me back into school because I did very poorly when I was there the first time. My mother died. I'm a young married. I'm now drafted into Vietnam. I come back home. And so I had no choice but to go to work hard, but I didn't talk about it because of some of the experiences I've just shared and even more, which we don't have time here to get into. And I also was taught no matter what hand you're dealt, you need to work hard to overcome that, and you need to give back to your country and to your community.
And so that's what you did when you got home, and I think that's what you did when you went there. Did you know, Greg, and do you think most of the folks knew what the fight was about, why you were fighting? The show's called Purpose Under Pressure, like why you were fighting for your country, but what was your country fighting for? Was there that sense of mission for you, or was it just head down, do your job, stay safe, get home alive?
I was the old man in my unit, Brian. I was 21. I had 19 and 18-year-olds with me. We were drafted and we were told we are here to try to free this country from being overtaken by communists.
Okay.
That's what we were told. But when you're in the thick of it, your job is to do what you've been asked to do by those who seemingly knew what they were doing. And that is search and destroy, take out the enemy, rid the South Vietnam, the Mekong Delta of Viet Cong with the hope that freedom would return to the country. The challenge, of course, is the South Vietnamese government itself was partially corrupt. We didn't know any of that. We're there every day involved in search and destroy missions, mortar fire missions, to try to free that part of the country of Viet Cong. So that's what we were told we were fighting for, to end up keeping that part of Vietnam free. At the end of the day, we all know that did not happen. And while I'm talking about this briefly, let's be clear here. This was a 10-year war. I was there near the front end of this. The war was 65 to 1975. I was there in 67. The second or third largest buildup at that point in time of troops, approaching 500,000 troops. Over 6.5 million troops were thrust into Vietnam. And at the end of the day, after all the loss, after all the search and destroy missions, after the loss of millions of civilians in Laos, South Vietnam, North Vietnam, Cambodia, not to mention the loss of hundreds of thousands of South Vietnamese troops and over 1 million North Vietnamese troops, what did we get from all of this? Vietnam is a communist country. The evidence of that is clear, but I think you also know I took my two sons back to Vietnam.
Mm-hmm.
And I went back, and it was very clear right up front that it is a communist country. I had a tour guide. I had a vehicle to take me and my two sons that I took back with me to see the condition of the country, to honor men that I lost in my platoon, and I did lose men in my platoon whose names are on the wall in Washington, D.C., and others wounded, to see the condition of the country, to see the condition of the people. The people were gracious. It's a beautiful country today, but still the evidences of the war is still there. And by the way, Brian, the fall of Saigon and the end of the war was 1975. 50 years ago this year. 50 years ago was the end of the war. But for me, it's been almost 60 years because I was there in 67 along with other men. So we spent a lot of time, a lot of money, a lot of people wounded, a lot of people killed. $1 trillion war when you adjust for inflation in today's dollars, the cost of that war, not to mention the collateral damage that's taken place in hundreds of thousands of families in this country when we came home. My first wife and I did not survive this experience. And part of that is on me. And there are others. So when you ask why don't people talk about it,
Yeah.
It's everything I've just shared
Yeah.
and more. And so one question you haven't asked yet, and if you did, I've missed it. So here it is. Why did you write the book? And why did you write it now? I'm 80 years old. I can't wait much longer if I'm going to tell my story. I've told my story enough, and I've had enough book signings, and I've done enough presentations that I've had widows, I've had wives of veterans, not just because they read the book, but because I now allow for questions and answers when I go talk about the book. But they've learned more about the book than they have sometimes from their own veteran husbands, and from the widows. They have learned more from the book than what they did from their husbands. And Brian, before I forget it, I'll give you one evidence of why the book. And I've been authorized to do this, and I did not share this with you before we talked. This is a thank you card. I have had tons of those. I'm only going to read this one, and then I'm going to tell you who it is.
Good. Thank you.
Dear Greg, thank you so much for the signed copy of your Vietnam book. Your story truly needed to be told. I am grateful to know the conditions my brother endured in his final months on Earth in Vietnam. Thank you for all of your efforts. Sincerely, Marty Irwin.
Okay.
Marty Irwin owns Irwin Office Equipment. Her brother, Roger Adams, was killed in Vietnam.
Yeah.
There are many people that still don't know what the conditions and circumstances were of their family members that were either wounded or killed. And even the wounded who came sometimes still don't talk about it. The purpose of the book is to help people understand. The other purpose of the book is our young people today know nothing.
I wanted to get to that. That's right. They don't.
They know nothing about Vietnam and what I'm going to call boots on the ground, the strategy and the impact on that country and on this country. And so what have we learned from Vietnam? Our young people need to learn, but they're not going to learn unless the stories are told. So at the end of this book, in the last chapter, it basically says, I've told this story while I still can, but there are hundreds of thousands of other stories that could be told. And I hope many who have it will consider doing it for the sake of their children, their spouses, or their loved ones. But for our young people who are the future leaders of this country, so the mistakes of Vietnam are not made again. And Robert McNamara, who was the Secretary of Defense, actually finally admitted in a podcast or a book that he wrote in the 1990s, said there were significant strategic military errors made in Vietnam. Well, what have we learned from that? Did we learn anything from it as it relates to Iraq and Afghanistan? You're talking an old Vietnam vet.
Well, have we? Can you tell?
My answer is no.
What haven't we learned? What mistakes are we repeating?
We are sending troops to war when the strategy of in it to win it is not clearly defined.
What does that mean?
So what it means is, and I'm going to use the Vietnam experience.
Yep.
This was not defined as a declared war, Brian.
Right.
It was defined as a, quote, military conflict, which in English, a glorified policing action. We did not have, we had the tools available to win that thing, but we didn't use them because it wasn't a declared war. It was a conflict. It was a military
Politics
conflict.
got involved, right?
Pardon me?
Politics got involved in that kind of thing?
Politics got involved. The media was reporting things, some of which was true, some of which was not true. But in the meantime, you had millions of us over 10 years, boots on the ground and in the air and in support, involved in a conflict where the military strategy was not clearly defined enough to actually win it. We had the military horsepower and the capability to win it. Well, wait a minute.
Of course.
Why didn't we do that? Well, let me tell you this. On one search and destroy mission, after we cleared, quote, a Viet Cong, what I'm going to call nest, we found weapons on the ground, and we found leaflets of different kinds of weapons left in this hooch. And I looked at them, and I said, wait a minute. I've never seen these type of weapons before. It became clear that a lot of these weapons, or the diagrams of these weapons, were from China, and they were from Russia. Well, here we are, a half a world away. Well, who are the allies of the North? It's the Russians and it's the Chinese. And we had evidence of that after a search and destroy mission 2 months after my unit is in Vietnam, and I'm sitting there saying to myself, if we as troops on the ground know this, surely the military leaders that are involved in putting us in this situation in the first place know this, or don't they? Or was the military strategy not clear enough? We were concerned about the collateral damage of killing men, women, and children that were not in the military. And plus, what will Russia do and what will China do if we really had the strategy be in it to win it? That's my take. Others may disagree, but for those of us on the ground, I don't think so.
So when you were on the ground and you were going through that and you realized, and I read in the book, it talked about the idea that we're not allowed to shoot until we were shot out, which doesn't make sense. It's part of that strategy and things.
That only happened once. After that, when you see something move and you know it's not, and you know it's not men, women, and children, and you can tell that it's the enemy, you throw that out of the books, because
I didn't know that.
The enemy had absolutely no rules. There was no code of conduct.
Right.
There was no ethics of war. Once we learned the nature of the war, boots on the ground, the don't fire unless fired upon, that went out the window.
From the top down, or was that your own choice? From the top down, that went out the window. You were told, okay,
No,
that law goes away.
No.
It was just the way you responded. You say, no, I'm not following that rule.
It's the way my platoon sergeant and my company captain and our unit respond, because if you're on the thick of it, keep in mind, the generals and the colonels, they're not in the thick of it.
They're not there, right?
We are. Now, they learned after a while, what the situation was. But at the end of the day, Brian, 10 years later, in 1972 or 73, which is near the end of the war, everybody on the planet that had any kind of reasonable sense knew this was not going to end well. It was going to ultimately be a communist country, yet we were still sending troops over
Couldn't
there.
Get out, or wouldn't
We're
get out.
still sending them. We're still sending them.
So, Greg, there's so much in your book about the way it was there, and I'm not going to take a ton of time, because I know that must have just been hell, and trying to live every single day and live up to your own standards and yet fight against the orders coming down. I can't even imagine. I'm interested in the future. You talk about learning. That's why you wrote this book. Let's talk about this. I think this is true. I could go to just about anybody in this country and say, when did the Revolutionary War end? Well, 1778, right? Or, after the 1776 signing of the Declaration. That's that. We know that history. We know the Civil War history. We know most of World War I and definitely World War II history. We're taught all that in school. I bet if I walked into any bar and said, hey, Walmart, when was the Vietnam War? No one would know. What were we fighting for? No one would know. What did we learn? No one would know. Did we win? Did we lose? No one would know. We're not taught this stuff. And it's not just because veterans like you didn't want to talk about it when they came home. It's because there's something holding the whole story back. Are we, and I don't mean this at all disrespectful, are we from the government level or teaching level ashamed of it and trying to hold it down? Do we just not understand it enough and just sweep it under the rug? Why don't we talk about the Vietnam War? We don't talk much about Korea either. Why don't we talk about those things?
The nature of the Korean War and the Vietnam War, although Korea and World War II had some similarity,
yes,
Vietnam was a totally different war. The people in this country didn't understand it. Our military leaders didn't understand it until we were so deep into it. They felt, well, we've committed to be here. We'll just throw more bodies. We'll keep doing the same strategy for 10 years, which did not work. The country got tired of it. And then the whole issue when we came home, the media reported the worst of the worst of the situation. But the troops that came home, we took the brunt of it. And so between some of our experiences there, and again, I'm speaking from my experience, as well as, when troops came home, I meet with a group often on Wednesdays. It's called the Landing Zone. Every Wednesday in the Catholic Charities conference room on 2nd Street in Nashville, a group of Vietnam vets and other vets, all vets are invited. We go to this place. It's called the Landing Zone. LZ, Landing Zone. Hueys coming into LZ, jumping off choppers, rice paddies, search and destroy missions. Why is it called the LZ? We all relate to the term, but it's a safe haven for veterans to go visit, share, talk, or just sit there,
Hmm.
but some common experiences. I chose at this point in my life, I want more people to know about the circumstances then and the circumstances when we came home. That's what the book is about. But I chronicle it through my personal journey. And I got to tell you, Brian, for those who've already read the book, it's the good, it's the bad, and the ugly. And not just on a military level, but on a personal level, because I had some struggles and challenges. But my 6 kids said, Dad, we want to know the whole story while you can still tell it. And now that I've gotten to this point, I want our young people to know, so the young people of our country that become our future leaders, both political and community and military leaders, they learn from the events and circumstances of Vietnam. My take is we didn't learn as much as we should have as it related to Iraq and Afghanistan. Yes, I know why we went there. Yes, I understand why we did it. Well, is Afghanistan a democratic nation? No.
No.
Is Iraq a democratic nation? No. We've had the good sense to not put boots on the ground in some other places in the world since then. But our young people need to understand if we are going to go involved in a combat situation where we're putting the blood and treasure of our country at risk. In Vietnam, we did that more than any other war of its type. We better be careful about doing that, and we better be careful we have a strategy that we're in it to win it. That was never the case with Vietnam.
In your book signings and your travels and meeting with other veterans, do you feel like your efforts to write this book, you mentioned to me before the show, there's just not a lot of books out there. There's not a lot of stories out there. This is kind of a one of a kind even. Do you feel like this will start a trend? I know there's fewer and fewer stories to be told because there's fewer and fewer of you there. But do you feel like that the purpose of this book is actually going to bear some fruit, that the story beyond yours will begin to be told?
Everyone in the organization needs to know how to sell. Sales is the strength of any company. Whether or not you're in marketing, operations, or even finance, everyone has a strong shared accountability towards driving top-line revenue. Whether or not you're client-facing or talking over the phone, you're able to build a stronger level of rapport with the clients. Everyone in the organization shares that responsibility to know how to sell.
But do you feel like that the purpose of this book is actually going to bear some fruit, that the story beyond yours will begin to be told?
Here's the hope, Brian, and I didn't see this when I wrote the book. Is basically was for my family and for other people who know me. But as I've had the different book signings, and I've got 7 other locations I'll be going within the next 2 months that I currently know of, it's the hope that it will help widows and wives and children and grandchildren of Vietnam veterans, regardless of whether living or dead, have a better understanding as to what it was like for the one. Because every one of their dads or their grandpas or their uncles, in their world, they were the one.
We forget that, don't we? We see the mass of the war.
We see the masses. The media report the masses. And yes, there have been other books written about Vietnam by individual men. And I've read some of those. But this book is to help anybody who has experienced the trauma of war, rape, physical assault, or any other form of abuse. You can survive if you have the will to place your faith in good things, or in your faith, in your family, and in your community. It can help others overcome some of those challenges that I've just mentioned. Not just war, but war, rape, physical assault, or other forms of abuse. So it is my hope that this book will help other veterans tell their stories while they still can. I had 2 non-vets say to me, when I told them I wanted to go back to Vietnam, and I offered the trip to my 2 boys and to my girls, my 4 girls, and my wife. The lady said, "We're staying home. You and the boys go." But two non-veterans said, Greg, why would anybody want to go back to that hellhole?
Yeah. I was wondering why. Thank you for telling this story.
Two reasons. I wanted to go back to combat areas to honor those who I'd served with that never came home, but I also wanted to see the condition of the country and the people. Nothing has changed in terms of the condition of the people. The people were caught in the middle of this. We were caught in the middle of this. The people didn't want to be involved in this. It's still thousands of years of Oriental traditions, work in their fields, the rice paddies, very family-oriented people. They could not have been more gracious to me and my boys. They weren't alive when the war took place because the lifespan of a Vietnamese man and woman is not the lifespan of an American man and a woman. So what they understood about the war, if they understood anything, is what the communist government teaches them.
Yeah.
So those are the reasons why we went back, number one. Number two, Brian, and maybe this is selfish, I was hopeful. As a result of that experience, I would not replace the memories of almost 60 years ago, both there and when I came home, but I would have additional better memories coming home the second time.
Okay.
And I did.
Okay.
In that regards, it was helpful. And forgive me for taking this extra minute. When I left the United States, we were all put on troop trains from Fort Riley, Kansas, 18,000 of us on train after train after train to California, put on ships. We were at sea for 21 days. When I went out on the ship, the USS Rose, underneath the Golden Gate Bridge, crossed the Pacific, headed to Vietnam in 1967, in December, I went to the back of the ship, and I stood there as the ship pulls away with the United States until the Golden Gate Bridge disappeared. And I had this question: will I ever see my country again? Why do I tell you that now? When my boys and I went back to Vietnam, Cleveland, Chicago, California, when the plane takes off in California to head across the Pacific to go back to Vietnam in 2016, as the plane dips to cross the Pacific, I have a window seat and I'm looking down. And there's the Golden Gate Bridge. A totally different set of circumstances the second time around. So going back was very helpful to me, and I wrote a journal about my trip back to Vietnam, and I gave it to my family, but I didn't give it to maybe one or two other people. But that didn't seem to be quite enough. I wanted the book to get into the hands of other people, maybe to offer hope and healing for wives, widows, and I hope other Vietnam veterans, if they have it. Talk to your families. They want to know.
They do.
You may think they don't want to know.
They do.
But they want to know.
They do want to
know. And our country needs to know while we can still tell the story, and hopefully the young people will latch onto enough of our stories that the mistakes that were made with Vietnam will not be made with future generations for this country.
I have a couple of more questions to ask. I want to let you talk a little bit about your role with the veterans and promoting some of the things that they're doing now to keep things alive for them. But let's talk about that book real quick, because before I lose anybody, I want them to know. How do they buy this book or multiple copies of this book to share with their friends? How do they get in touch with you? Give me as many ways that people can take advantage of this work that you've done to help improve or change maybe their life as well.
The title of the book is Vietnam Survival, There and Home. You can contact me directly at my address at 1531 Arrow Drive, Ashland, Ohio. That's 1531 Arrow Drive, Ashland, Ohio. I will give you my phone number. My wife says, do not give anybody her phone number. Here's mine, 419-651-9953. That's 419-651-9953. Come to the Veterans Appreciation Day, and we'll talk about that in a minute. I will have a book signing event there. I have other book signing events coming up, and I will tell you this, my preference is to do the hard copy of the book, and I've done several of these. In every book that I place, I write a personal note in the front cover of the book, a personal message to the person who acquires the book, and I sign it and I date it. But if you can't come to the upcoming book signing events, or contact me at home, or contact me on my email address, it's all lowercase, GGG Stands for Greg and Gail, my wife, Greg and Gail, GGGORRELL @gmail.com. I'd prefer to do the hard copy, but if you aren't interested in hard copy, I now have it on Amazon.
Yes.
And you can just go on Amazon.com and type in just the name Greg space Gorrell, and the book will pop up. And there's a trailer that talks about the book and why the book. And so you can acquire it on either way. I will say this, Brian. I do have several places that have asked me to come and talk about the book. In fact, when I talk about the book, I do the Q&A every place I go. I'm now willing to do that.
Good.
But if there's other people in your audience after they've seen this, if they like me to come and talk to their groups, whoever their groups may be, bring copies of the books or do a Q&A, I'll be happy to do that. I have a stack of these for many others. And let me tell you who most of these are from.
Yes.
They're from wives and widows and relatives of Vietnam veterans. I had one man in this community, I'm not going to mention his name, he came to a book signing and he bought one book. And maybe this is the point, Brian. A week later, he called me and he said, how do I get 10 more? I said, well, you know how to get 10 more. I asked him, why do you want 10 more? He says, because a lot of my friends, and he's not a veteran, a lot of my friends are Vietnam veterans, and I want them to have a copy of the book.
Yeah.
Well, he did that. And 2 weeks after that, he called me and says, one of them would like to go to lunch with you and me. And we did that.
Good.
It helped open the door.
That's the exponential opportunity. You made one book, and it's going to be read by 10 people, and they're going to share it with 10 people, and they're going to share it with 100. And that's the way the story can get told. An amazing opportunity for that to happen because of the step that you took, the bravery that you took, the vulnerability you're showing to kind of break out of that shell that you've earned. You know, you could shut your mouth and go, but you're not, and you're telling the story, and it can't be easy. And I'm glad that you're doing it. So it's on Amazon, and people can find it, and they can call you, and they can email you. There's also the veterans event that's coming up. Can you talk a little bit about that too? Also, Greg, all your proceeds you mentioned yesterday, proceeds for this book go towards veteran services and things too. Can you talk a little bit about all of that?
Well, I'm going to talk about the last thing you mentioned first.
Good.
The proceeds from the sale of this book goes to the American Veterans Appreciation Events, Inc. It's a local group organization. It was organized by veterans and individual community members years ago for the sole purpose of having events to benefit veterans. Now, was it a group of Vietnam veterans and Vietnam era veterans that started this? The answer is yes, but it's for all veterans and their families. Every year there's a Veterans Appreciation event that takes place. It takes place at the Ashland County Airport. It's been taking place for years. And this year, the Veterans Appreciation event, again, will be held at Ashland County Airport. That's on Saturday, August the 9th. It's at 11 o'clock. So who is this for? It says Veterans Appreciation event, but it's a Veterans Appreciation event for every man, woman, and child, every family in this community and the surrounding communities. A couple of years ago, when we had the Vietnam Traveling Wall, the war memorial that represents the over 58,000 men and women that were killed here, people from all over the state, many, many counties come. And that's the desire, to have people come from all over to these events. So this year's event, I mean, it's for families. There'll be Huey helicopters here. There'll be a Cobra here. Actually, there's haircuts for veterans from 1 to 3 o'clock in the afternoon. There'll be the drone show at evening, but most important, come to support the veterans. So what are some of the things that are going to take place here? There's guest speakers. There'll be Major General John C. Harris Jr. It's free lunch for everybody that comes. There's all kinds of games for the kids activities, the bounce houses, frisbee golf, giant Jenga, 9 Square, Connect 4, Croc Center, RJ, the Foam Bash, Home Depot Wood Project face painting. There'll be a George Patton presentation regarding the World War II, a general. There'll be Matt Young music at 6:30, the Phil Delton the Dozers, the drone show. It's a day for families and their friends to come enjoy a Veterans Day. There are all kinds of exhibits there that people can come and learn more, participate in. But it's a day to really honor and recognize veterans of all eras. Elaine Hess will be there promoting her honor bus tours for veterans to take their spouses to all the traveling memorial or to all the memorials in Washington, D.C., which she's been doing for years. I will be there. There'll be an area set up where I will actually be in a tent, and I will be doing book signings. I'll answer questions, and I'll share experiences with people as much as they like. So we encourage the entire community, not just Ashland, but surrounding area. Invite your family and friends to come to this family day to support veterans with all kinds of events for every family member that comes.
I'm glad you shared that information, and we'll put that information in the show notes. I'll add it to the show, so if you are listening and you want to see some of this and see what he's talking about and hear it again or see it again, it'll be on video, so please do that.
Yeah, the opening exercise and the opening remarks and the pledge to the flag and the parachute is coming down onto the field to start the event. Starts at 11 o'clock, again, on Saturday, August the 9th. And rather than the fireworks, the drone show is phenomenal. It's taken place the last 2 or 3 years, and that drone show will commence about 9:30 that evening after all these other events have concluded.
And this show airing, I believe, is going to be airing, since we pre-recorded, of course. It's going to be just the week before. So, folks, if you're hearing about this, we're talking about this weekend coming up if you're hearing this show in its early days online. Greg, I have one final question, and it might be the stupidest question I've ever asked, and it might not. And I'm just going to ask it anyway because I'm interested. You served your country. You've lived a great life, and I know the things you've done here in Ashland, and I know the impact you've had on others and education and the business community and just in life in general. All the amazing things you've done in your life. You're happily married. You served your country in the war. It changed you. Are you proud of your service? Would you do it again? Would you change your life trajectory if you could go back and say, no, I didn't get drafted, I didn't go? If you could make that change, that hell that you went through, knowing what your life is today, would you change or would you go?
That's a tough question, Brian. Well, first of all, am I grateful I served my country? Categorically, yes. If my country asked me to serve again, keep in mind, we didn't know exactly what we were getting into then. If they asked me to serve, if I knew that this had the potential, having a good outcome, the answer is yes. Do I wish the strategy of the war had been different? Absolutely. Do I think that we learned much from Vietnam? I hope we have, by virtue of the fact that even though Afghanistan and Iraq are still communist countries, but maybe after all of these wars, we've learned, since we have no boots on the ground in Ukraine. I hope in the future, if we're going to send our men, women, and kids, we don't get involved at all, or we better have a strategy to be in it to win it. Mm-hmm. And that was not the case, as it turns out, in Vietnam. And so I hope we've learned from that. But we're not going to learn as completely as we should learn from that, if not just my story, but thousands and thousands of other men and women who have served. They need to share their stories with their families and their kids and their grandkids, because they're the future leaders of our country. Yeah. I would hope that colleges and universities and high schools, to whatever degree that they're teaching about these things now, the teaching goes to the next level so that enough of the blood and treasure are not squandered. And in my judgment, I'm glad I served, but it did not end the way that we hoped it would end. Yeah. On a military level, on a financial level, and on a personal level, because it impacted thousands of families in this country in terms of divorce. I was divorced from my first wife. That's on me because of challenges I had. My current wife and I, we've been together 41 years. I found a way, 43 years. I better get that right. I'll be in trouble. So I've been able to navigate through this, but it took me decades to navigate. And as you well know, if you read the book, there's 2 or 3 chapters in there when my life was not pretty.
Yeah.
And it could have gone a different direction.
Mm-hmm. And I'm glad that it didn't. And I will tell you that, Greg, that I think that anybody that reads this book should hopefully, at least, if not, personally thank you, but owe you a bit of debt of gratitude, because the story that you're telling, the life that you lived, the things that you've had to do and did proudly for your country are well felt. You said it earlier in the show. We talk about the masses. Every single individual and every single moment of time matters so much more. And thank you for all that you did. I've done the show for many years now in a couple of different ways, and I've had many veterans on the show. And each time I tell them that it feels odd to me to say to each of you, thank you for your service, because it seems so contrite, like, hey, thank you for your service. Almost like, hey, Merry Christmas. Like it's something so important, and yet we just throw it out there. But it's not something that can be thrown out there. But what else can we do? I was raised during peacetime. I had no opportunity to serve. I don't think I would have served anyway. I think I would have been a terrible failure. But I wish that I could have done more for my country. And so I'm thankful for you that when you had the chance, that you did everything that you could for your country, and that you're telling this story now. I'll let you get some final comments here, Greg, and then I've got to wrap up the show. But I just wanted to thank you and tell you sincerely from the bottom of my heart, I just appreciate everything you and every other veteran has done for me.
Going forward, and I know you need to wrap up, I'll say this. It's perfectly fine to say to Vietnam veterans, thank you for your service. But if you want to impact the heart and the soul of a Vietnam veteran when you see one, just say, welcome home. You have no idea what that will mean to them, because that did not happen 50 and 60 years ago. And the second thing I will leave with your viewers, not just my story, veteran stories of the Vietnam era need to be told for the benefit of wives, widows, children, and for our young people in schools and colleges, so that they understand exactly what happened there. Why were we there? What did we learn from this? So that these young people that are the future leaders of our country do not make the same mistakes again. On a military level, on a financial level, on a political level, but on the personal impact of families' lives, and millions of families' lives were affected by the outcome of this war. So, Brian, thank you for taking a few minutes with me, and I hope your viewers will take advantage of the book. And by the way, remember, the money doesn't come to me. It goes to help vets, but the purpose of the book is to help other families.
That's Greg Gorrell. The book is called, I've got it here in front of me. The book is called Vietnam Survival, There and Home, a story about life, death, heartache, and faith, forgiveness, hope, and healing. It's by Greg Gorrell. And if you get a chance, if you can buy that book, if you can grab it on Amazon and you reach out to Greg and be a part of what he's trying to do, I'd greatly appreciate it. He would greatly appreciate it. And I think a lot more people than you ever would know will appreciate that, because it's moving something forward. I have something I want to say, and it is that my father served in the later days of Korea, and I never asked him the questions.
Yeah.
I can't now.
Right.
My grandfather served, and we found later in an extremely in World War II a famous war, and I can't ask him those questions. He wouldn't talk about it, but I can't ask him those questions. And so I urge anyone listening, find someone a day older than you and just sit and listen. And find out what that person has gone through in their life, whether it be a veteran, whether it be anyone who's served in the factory, anybody that's served a day longer than you've lived. Folks, talk to them. Don't grill them. Just listen, because they have stories to tell, especially our veterans, but every single person that has gone through this life and provided life for others and served others and been a part of this great country. Let's learn from them while we have a chance, because, folks, we won't always. And I think that should be our purpose today. Let's learn from our folks that can teach us things. Otherwise, we will learn nothing. Greg Gorrell, thank you so much for being a guest on Purpose Under Pressure. The show is brought to you by Sandler by the Ruby Group. Sellers under pressure to perform. Sandler helps you to succeed on purpose. You'll find all past episodes of Purpose Under Pressure at brianmediastrategies.com/podcast and wherever you stream your favorite shows. We do this every week, and we will see you next time on Purpose.